Have both parties had a chance to review the violation report?
Yes, Judge.
Judge, I reviewed a violation report, I think last week in my office. Are the violation reports the same?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, we have reviewed that violation report.
All right. Are both parties ready to proceed on the violation report? State?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
We are, Judge.
Any witnesses? State?
No, Judge.
Defense? All
I'd call Darren Doge, Your Honor.
right. Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. You can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
Darren Doze.
All right. Defense?
Mr. Doge, have you seen the violation report?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When did you see it?
Maybe a few days ago. I'm not sure exactly which day.
And how is it that you saw it?
Through text message that you sent.
Okay. And on the violation report, well, prior, and it's not, you do know that not knowing the law or not necessarily knowing the rules is not a defense to prosecution or not a defense to being sanctioned, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. But having said that, did you, up until I told you there was a violation report, did you know that you had violated any of your conditions of bond?
No, sir.
Did you intentionally, well, what are the violation reports for, as you recall?
As I recall, what I looked at was stopping at unauthorized places, such as like food places and the gym.
Okay.
From what I can tell.
And did you know that you were not permitted to go to food places and or the gym?
No, sir.
In other words, you didn't know you were violating your conditions of bond.
Correct.
And if you knew that, would you have done those things?
No, sir.
And do you take these judges, this judge's order and your pretrial service officer's directions seriously?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Are you currently employed?
Yes, sir.
And where are you employed?
Chili's restaurant.
What do you do at Chili's restaurant?
A team lead, a server. I handle customers and I do some training and kind of manage the restaurant.
And other than work, what have you been doing while on this bond?
Grocery, food, gym, bank, and gas.
Have you, when you've had to go to the bank or to the grocery store, have you have you ever asked for permission to do those things?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why did you not ask for permission with regard to these bond violations that they're now alleging that you committed?
My previous GPS officer extended my hours availability for me to work and to do those things. And I've been doing those things for quite some time now. And so I believe it was last Saturday, I was at work and my GPS started going off. And I called and emailed the GPS officers and left the messages and text messaged them. They didn't respond to me until that following Wednesday, about 4 or 5 days later. And so I did not know that I was in violation or that I could not go to those places or the hours that they didn't put into the system correctly. Because my previous GPS officer input hours from Monday through Thursday for about 9 a.m. to midnight, Friday 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to midnight, and Sunday 9 a.m. to about 1 a.m. And so I've been working within the confines that I know of for my bond and GPS conditions and going to the places that I know of that I could go to upon the information that I received from my previous GPS officer. And in addition to that, once I got a new GPS officer, which was a couple of months ago, I asked him face to face directly at the location on Kamal Street, what were my hours, and he notified me of my hours. So that way I can make sure that we were on the same page. And so all of this information I'm just now getting about last week, or the information about the violation was a few days ago, maybe last week sometime. And I didn't even know that I had to be at court today because the information that the new GPS officers are giving me are incorrect. They didn't notify me of any court hearings today or anything like that, even though we have talked since I received the text message about the violations. We talked and I took a UA last Thursday. So they're not effectively communicating with me of my bond and GPS conditions.
Well, I mean, okay. Drug tests, how many drug tests have you taken?
Over 70.
Okay, have you come up positive on anything as far as you know?
No, sir.
Okay, other than the restaurants that are listed and the gym, I think about 3 times, have you gone anywhere else that you clearly know you're not supposed to go to?
No, sir.
Okay, have you been to any bars or like places that primarily sell alcohol?
No, sir. I do not drink.
Okay, and do you know the severity or the seriousness of potential bond violation?
Yes, sir.
And now that what do you now know that I guess you're not permitted to go anywhere other than work and your house unless you have specific permission ahead of time?
Yes, sir.
And are you going to follow that to a T?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay. Are you sorry that you violated your conditions of bond if in fact you did violate your conditions of bond?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. 100%.
Pass the witness at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Dose, what was the name of your previous GPS officer, if you remember?
I believe his name was Freddie Williams.
Freddie Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the one that initially gave you those extended hours.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said the GPS officer after him, is that your current GPS officer?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that person's name?
Timothy Hebert, I believe.
When was the last time you spoke with Mr. Hubert?
Maybe sometime last week, Wednesday, when they contacted me after I emailed them that previous Saturday.
And what did you and Mr. Hubert talk about during that conversation?
He asked me where I was at, why I had stopped at certain places. And I informed him that I was at work and that I was out during the hours that I was allotted by my previous GPS officer. And he had already spoken about my hours of operations of availability with my GPS conditions prior to that.
Did he confirm to you during that conversation what your hours were supposed to be? What did he tell you your hours were supposed to be during that conversation?
During that conversation, he told me that my hours were 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday.
And last Wednesday when you were talking to him, was that after the hours of 3 p.m. or before the hours of 3 p.m.?
I think it was before the hours of 3 p.m.
Before 3 p.m.?
I believe so.
Okay. Was Mr. Hubert aware when he became your GPS officer that you had extended hours from Mr. Williams?
I would assume that he did because he told me. Because in person, when I spoke to him, I asked him what my hours were and he let me know. This was at the GPS facility on Mount Street. This is when I first met him, which was a few months ago.
Okay.
So he verbally told me, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so from Mr. Hubert, you've gotten two different stories of what your hours are supposed to be. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Judge.
Any further questions?
No, ma'am, Your Honor.
All right, would anybody like to question Mr. Hebert?
Is he here?
He's on Zoom.
Sure.
All right. Did you unmute yourself, Mr. Hebert, please?
I'm trying. Am I in that, ma'am?
You are now.
Okay.
Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
My name is Timothy Aber.
Ah, I should have known. Bear.
Yes, ma'am.
Another quarterback from LSU has that name, but okay.
He's about a fifth cousin, ma'am.
Wow, fifth cousin?
Yeah.
All right. I was wondering if it was Bear or not.
Yes, ma'am.
Silent H's. All right. Who has questions for Mr. Aber?
I'll attempt to, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Haber. My name is Neil Kalfas, and I represent Darren Doze, and I just have a few questions for you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
When did you take over or resume the supervision of Mr. Darren Doze?
Oh gosh. Without looking at it, I'd say at least a month.
And at that time, well, how many people are you supervising currently?
About 55 to 60,
And
somewhere in there.
why is it or how is it that you took over Mr. Doe's case?
I inherited him from my previous person who had this caseload. He moved on to a different department, and I'm now working this caseload.
Okay. When you took over his supervision, do you get copies of all of his bond conditions and any orders that are modifying those bond conditions?
They're scanned into the account, sir.
Okay. Did you get those in this case?
I did. However, I did not have adequate time to go over with a fine-tooth comb over any one defendant. Just as comes up, and Mr. Doze did not come up to my attention until recently.
Okay. When you started supervising Mr. Doze, do you go over their bond conditions with them, or do you just assume that they know what their bond conditions are?
No, sir. When they call in, we go over the bond conditions, sir.
Okay. Do you specifically remember going over Mr. Doze's bond conditions with him?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. When was that?
I can numerous times. As far as back as I've had Mr. Doze on my caseload.
So every time that you have contact with him, do you go over each and every bond condition with him and any orders that have amended those bond conditions?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Has there been an order that amended his conditions of bond?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Okay. What are Mr. Doze's conditions of bonds?
One moment, please. Let me pull them up. Probably should have done that earlier. My apologies.
No problem.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I
Oh,
apologize.
he said he should have done that earlier,
Okay.
and he was apologizing.
Okay. So he's on partial house arrest. He has an order of no contact with Renita Smith. He's on weekly drug alcohol testing and no possession of firearms and weekly reporting by phone. He has one other, I believe is the same one with different conditions. Come on. He's also, for another case, this was 2022 CR 0494. The other one is for CR for 2022 CR 0493. The only difference on this one is he's got no contact with Nikra Demisha.
Okay. With regard to his partial house arrest, are there any specifics with regard to when he's on the house arrest or the hours?
That's correct, sir. To my shame, I missed this for a great period of time until I actually took a look at the actual order. It's not listed on the sanctions page. He's only allowed to work between 3 and 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and then 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday.
Okay. And I'm not criticizing you. I mean, I could tell you that a lot of times when you're in a courtroom and you're the defendant, you're in worse position than everybody else in that courtroom. But what are his conditions? Like, what are his rules? Like what can he not do?
I'm not sure what you mean, sir.
Well, in talking to Darren, and I didn't realize, no disrespect to this court or anyone else, but I didn't really know how to hearing today on this, and so I'm somewhat unprepared, and I apologize for
Well,
that.
let me ask this. State,
Yes, Judge.
are you going to be asking that his bond be revoked?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So then what we're trying to do here is figure out what his rules are so he knows what those rules are so we won't be back here for this again. So we have Mr. Bear on and we have Mr. Williams on. So I'm trying to discover what he was told and what he thinks the rules are. Because I'm looking at part of the unauthorized stops. There are different apartments. I have some concern about that. I understand that some of this is just food and going to work out. I mean, it's just food and going to work out. I understand that. But we have a Mr. Smoke Shop. I'm assuming that's not barbecue, that's smoking. Right. And then we have the apartments. And what is the human being? Is that coffee? Human and the word being? Is that a coffee shop? All right. So they're saying that you were there from 12:45 p.m. until 3:58 p.m. Human, the word human, space, and then the word being. Like a lima bean. All right. So,
Maybe it's a coffee place or something. I'm really not sure, Your Honor.
okay. And I understand, I see some of this has to do with medical appointments. So we're trying to make clear that you know what your rules are because the state is saying that they're not going to be asking that I issue a judge's warrant.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm trying to figure out too what you've been told and so that you can follow those rules. So state, his other officer, previous officer, Mr. Williams, is on as well. Did anybody want to continue with their questions of Mr. Hebert?
Yeah, I have a couple questions for Mr. Hebert,
Yes.
Judge. Hi, Mr. Hebert, how are you doing?
Hello.
I just have a couple of questions for you. You said that Mr. Doe's current hours are 3 to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and then 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays.
That's correct.
Are you aware of if there have ever been any changes to his hours while he's been on GPS?
No. It's my it was my oversight for a long period of time that I was not aware of the actual conditions because it wasn't listed on the sanctions page. We have a listing of all the conditions, and it's basically a summary of I haven't looked over the conditions that to the point where I noticed that the hours restriction.
So you're not aware that his hours had ever changed. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. So let's go over the places that Mr. Doe's is and is not allowed to go. Is Mr. Doe's allowed to go to any restaurants?
If he works at them, yes.
Only if he works at them.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. Is he allowed to go to the gym?
No, ma'am.
Is he allowed to go to an apartment or residence of a friend or family member?
No, ma'am.
Is he allowed to go to any smoke shops?
No, ma'am.
Okay. What about places like the grocery store or the laundromat?
Literally, the partial house arrest allows him to go to work and nothing else.
Okay. So he would need to ask permission to do things such as go to the grocery store or go to the laundromat or go to the doctor's office.
That's correct, ma'am.
And he currently doesn't have permissions to do any of those things.
That's correct, ma'am. He hadn't asked me for, generally speaking, what happens is if a defendant asks us if they can go to the laundromat, for example, our general thing is we ask them if they can, we need a court order to do that. The same with anything else other than work.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hebert. No more questions, Judge.
All right. Any further questions?
Just one.
Sure.
Mr. Aber, would
Yes,
he
sir.
would he get a global, I guess, motion to go to the laundromat, or if he was doing something special like a doctor's appointments or laundromat or the grocery store, does he get a court order for each time, or are people normally asking for general court orders where they can go to the grocery store to buy groceries?
As you're aware, there are three categories of house arrest. There's full house arrest, partial house arrest, and tracking only. I have suggested Mr. Dose he contact you specifically to get on tracking only, as he seems to have other things go on. But to answer your question, sir, any other appointment other than work or a doctor's appointment, attorney appointment, stuff like that, we would have to have a court order, sir.
Okay. If in the event that he requested tracking only and the judge wanted your opinion whether or not he was a candidate for tracking only, what would your opinion be?
Until I did a research into his background, I would have said Mr. Dose has been pretty exemplary and has done a pretty good job of fitting into his conditions. After doing some research, I would be on the fence about that, as Mr. Dose is going places he's not supposed to go.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
All right. Anything else from Mr. Aber?
Not from the state judge.
All right. So Officer Williams, his previous officer, is on. Are there any questions for Mr. Williams?
I don't have any questions for Mr. Williams.
Just briefly.
All right. Mr. Williams, can you unmute, please? And Mr. Aber, if you could stay on so that we can make sure that we have what orders the court is going to set for Mr. Doze. All right.
Of
Mr.
course.
Williams, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You can lower your hand. State your name for the record.
Freddie Williams.
All right. Defense.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams. My name is Neil Kalfas, and I represent Mr. Doze, and I just have a few questions for you. Do you recall supervising Mr. Doze?
Yes, sir.
During your interactions with him, was he compliant with the things that you asked him to do?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever have any issues or problems with Mr. Doze?
No, sir.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir, for your
All
testimony.
right. Any questions?
None for the from the state judge.
All right. So state you're not asking for him to be revoked. What are you asking for? At least his bond to be revoked. What are you asking for?
I'm just asking that he get in compliance, remain in compliance, Judge. Pretty easy here today.
Defense.
Judge, I haven't, if we have filed it, I don't know that we filed it yet, but I will file a motion with the court to ask for tracking only. I understand that is not, I guess, what he's on right now, which I've had very regular and consistent with contact with Mr. Doze. And as an officer of the court, I found him to be quite compliant, of course, with me, but again, I represent him. So that's what you would expect between an attorney and their client. But I do apologize to the court and to pretrial services for any issues that Mr. Doze has had. I genuinely believe that, at least in his own mind, he thought he had a little bit of leeway, which I recognize that in this environment, you don't take anything for granted. And so, I'd like for his conditions of bond to be relaxed so that he can go to eat in the gym. I don't know about any smoke shops or bars or other places like that. I did ask him while we were standing up here, why is he going by someone's apartment? And he said that he had went by to borrow a pair of shoes. And so I know with the way that the justice system has changed, particularly as it relates to bond and bond conditions, I take the judge's orders and conditions of bond very seriously. And I pass that on to my clients as well, because it's a lot easier to represent somebody when they're in the free world than it is when they're incarcerated waiting for trial. And so I'm glad that the state's not moving to revoke his bond, and we will obviously, Mr. Doze will abide by any conditions that this court sets. And with that, I'll rest.
All right. So to the pretrial services officer, Mr.
Yes,
Eber,
ma'am.
my understanding then is he's allowed to work Mondays through Thursdays from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then he's allowed to work on Sundays from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. State, do you have any objection to adding him on Saturday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. just on tracking where he can go do laundry, go to the grocery store?
No objection from the state judge. I believe that's reasonable.
We would ask for that, Your Honor.
All right. So, Mr. Doze, these are the rules. You can't violate these rules. Monday through Thursday from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. work only. None of the extra stops. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays, work only. No extra stops. On Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Is that enough time for laundry and grocery shopping? I don't know.
It's really not, Judge, if we could get a little bit more time.
I think it's reasonable for the grocery judge. I'm not so sure about the laundry. That might take longer, but I'm not privy to whether or not Mr. Dose has a laundry or a washer and dryer at home.
Do you have a washer and dryer?
I do have a washer and dryer.
All right. Because from my memory, laundry, depending on if you're using the large machine at the laundromat, that's usually about an hour. And then the dry, if you want to put it, depending on if you're going to put it on high, medium, they don't recommend high. But if you do medium, depending on what's in there, probably like 30 minutes. But I'm glad you have the washer and dryer. So then we'll do 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Saturdays. That will be tracking only. And that's for him. That's for you to take care of whatever else you need to take care of.
Yes, ma'am.
And if there are no more violations, then the court will consider lengthening that. All right. Is there anything else?
Nothing from the state.
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you both for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
All righty.
Yes. We have one more matter with yours. And Mr. Ebert, is there any other time for him to report to you coming up or no?
Generally speaking, he's on weekly reporting. If I recall correctly, I'm sorry, give me one moment, please. He's got a drug test on the 18th. And that's and then after that, he'll have another one on the 25th, for example. And then we have he has court in May. That's the only thing I have on my schedule for him.
State, do you still want to continue with the weekly reporting by phone?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. All right. And then I will add tracking on Saturdays. 9 a.m. to, and I'll do 12:30 p.m.